Is modern Israel really the fulfillment of Bible prophecy? A lot of people have that question because they see the secular nature of the modern nation of Israel, and they say, well, if it's secular, it couldn't be God doing things with it, so therefore it's not the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. It's the church, it's this, it's that, and they get all wacky with it. Well, today I'm going to be doing a study on this book right here, The Jewish State by Theodor Herzl. Just got done reading it not long ago. Lots of notes, lots of quotations from this. But I'm not going to have to make you wait till the end for me to answer the question, because I can answer it very quickly. Is modern Israel really the fulfillment of Bible prophecy? Point number one, the Jews return in unbelief according to Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 16 through 38. God scatters them because they reject Him, their Messiah, God manifest in the flesh in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so He says, get out of the land of Israel. I'm going to give you a spirit of blindness. And in part, some Jews certainly did get saved. Some Jews get saved today. Praise the Lord for it. But the vast majority of the Jews that are in the land of Israel, they're there in unbelief. You say, it was the Rothschilds that helped to finance it, whatever. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll show you the quotes. Okay, I'm going to show you all that stuff. But I'll save you time here. I'm going to tell you exactly what the study's about. Point number two, religious Jews. You'll hear this. I'm a Jew I'm of the religion of the Jews and whatever. Religious Jews are actually the synagogue of Satan. Revelation chapter 2, verse 9 and chapter 3, verse 9 identify them as such. All right, people that say that they are Jews and are not. That can only be true of a Gentile posing as a Jew. All right, and you have to understand, God ended Judaism. All right, there's no more religion of the Jews and whatever type of thing out there right now in God's sight that He recognizes as being holy and true. If you're a Jew and you get saved, you're a Christian. Okay, if you're a Gentile, you get saved, you're a Christian. We're all one in Christ. All right, please understand that. All right, point number three, God's wrath will be poured out as the revelation, hear that, and the final book of the Bible, the revelation of Jesus Christ. And you can read about that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16, which talks about the wrath of God coming to the Jews, all right, not to the church. All right, they have rejected Jesus Christ, and the new covenant is waiting for the Lord to bring it in. At the end of the time of Jacob's trouble, He's going to pour out His wrath and judgment on them, revealing Himself with signs. The Jews require a sign. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 talks about that. And He's going to show the Jews with the two witnesses, with all the events going on in Israel, and let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains, Matthew chapter 24 talks about that. It's all about the nation of Israel. And you have to understand that. So the nation of Israel, the modern nation of Israel, yes, it is God's fulfillment of prophecy. And I want you to understand something. Matthew chapter 18, verse 7, King James Bible says, woe unto the world because of offenses, sins, as a result of God giving man a free will. That's the offenses that the Lord's talking about here. For it must needs be that offenses come. The offenses are coming. The Jews return in unbelief. That's an offense. What the Jews have been doing over the last 2,000 years, that's an offense. It's a sinful thing, what they've been involved in. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. All right? Offenses will happen. Bible prophecy is not, in the future there's going to be wonderful, happy times and there will never be anything bad. Yes, in eternity, that will be coming. God will wipe away all tears and everything and part of the book of Revelation. But before that, there's a whole lot of bad things that happen. And why? See, for years I was taught as a Christian going to church. I was raised in churches. I was dedicated as a baby up front. I went to church buildings, mostly my whole life. And I was taught over and over again that the Jews are God's chosen people. Partly true. They're not all Jews, which they're not all of Israel, which say they're of Israel. They're not all Abraham's seed down through Isaac, Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They're not all his seed. You have to understand that. So God's chosen people, partly true. Well, God's blessing is supposed to come upon the Jews. Well, hold on a second. Right now, we're supposed to be warning the Jews about the wrath to come. Okay? We're supposed to warn them about that. So they are back in unbelief. Religious Jews are there as the synagogue of Satan, and the wrath will be coming to separate the wheat and the tares, by the way, another prophecy thing there. And as Christians, we're not supposed to just say complete total blessings and we'll never judge the Jews for the sin that they're doing. Okay, that is wrong. All right? So the offenses will come. But I'm going to get into this book now, and I'm going to show you some very shocking things in here to prove these points right here. The Jews, Theodor Herzl did not say, hey, let's come back to the land because God's putting this in my heart and all these other things. He didn't. I'll just spoil the surprise here at the beginning of this whole thing. Israel is a corporation. It is a market, a new market that they wanted to build and use, exploit the name of Jew to get people to go back there to it and make lots of money and lead the world in technology and technological developments and everything else. More on that in a future study. Some shocking stuff coming out about that. Military technology type of things being born in Israel and used in Israel that will be carried out throughout the rest of the world. Get into that in another video. But I'm going to be reading from this. I'm not going to have an overhead camera and whatever else. If it's a really important quote, I will show it by holding it up to the camera. But that's the way I'm going to go through this thing. I want to try to get through this as quickly as I possibly can because there's a lot of quotes here. Okay. In 1882, Leo Pinsker, a Jewish physician of Odessa, disturbed by the pogroms of 1881, made a keen analysis of the position of the Jews, declared that anti-Semitism was a psychosis and incurable. Kind of funny because psychosis. Who came up with the whole thing of psychiatry? Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, basically, if you want to get right down to it, both Jews. Calling themselves Jews. Whether they were actual Jews or not, I don't know. But both Jews. And if you watch my study on Are Christians Mentally Ill, done many years ago, I think it was 2014 or 2015, something like that, so a long time ago, I get into the fact that I believe that psychiatry, modern psychiatry, is just basically a form of an inquisition type of a thing where they can put you through an evaluation and determine if you are mentally ill, and if you're incurable, well then, off to the gas chambers or, the guillotine eventually, because they're the Noahide system. If you believe that Jesus Christ is God, then you'll have your head cut off because that's idolatry, according to their system. You could watch my study on the 7 Noahide laws to see the proof of that. But interesting that anti-Semitism, they say, is psychosis and incurable. Even though most of the people that are in the whole nation of Israel thing, including this man right here, they weren't even Jewish, ethnically speaking. But they can say that you're anti-Semitic if you speak against them. Anti-Shemitic would be a better way to say it. Shem, one of Noah's 3 sons, that's the father of the Oriental races, including the Jews. But you can, see a man who's a European, purely European, and he calls himself a Jew, a religious Jew, and if you speak against him, you're anti-Semitic. Okay, yeah. But anyhow, it says here, declared that anti-Semitism was a psychosis and incurable, that the cause of it was the abnormal condition of Jewish life, and that the only remedy for it was the removal of the cause through self-help and self-liberation. The Jewish people must become an independent nation, settled on the soil of their own land and leading the life of a normal people. Isn't it weird that it's okay for the Jews to do that, but yet white people can't? White people say we want to have our own area, we want to have our own community or our own thing. We don't want any Jews or anybody else, any other illegals coming in. Oh, racism. Jews, we want to have our own nation and we don't want any other people coming in there. Oh, that's okay. Just had to point that out. Page 12. So furiously did the cataract of his thoughts rush through him, this is speaking of Herzl here, that he thought he was going out of his mind. He was not working out the idea was working him out. It would have been an hallucination had it not been so informed by reason from first to last. Kind of weird. Page 13. In the Jewish state, Herzl alludes to the language of the Jewish state and passes Hebrew by as a manifestation of no great significance. Huh? Yeah. You see, the synagogue of Satan, most of these people, they don't know Hebrew. They speak Yiddish. You'll see that here in a minute. Well, I'll just continue reading. It says, he has a poorer opinion of Yiddish, the common language of Jews, which he regards as the, quote, furtive language of prisoners. So you get these people, they come out and they say that we're Jews. And they'll attack your King James Bible here, and they'll say, well, it says a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, but it should be a young woman. If you understand the Hebrew word there, the Hebrew, they don't even speak Hebrew. They don't speak Hebrew, but they can judge the King James Bible based on Hebrew texts that they don't fully even understand. Weird. Very weird. But continuing here, the bottom of page 14, going over to page 15. Well, it says here, I'll read up a little bit further. It says, he witnessed the degradation of Dreyfus and heard the cries of down with the Jews in the streets of Paris. What excited him in the strangest way was the unaccountable indifference of Jews themselves to what seemed to him the menace of the existing situation. He saw the Jews in every land encircled by enemies, hostility to them growing with the increase of their numbers. Interesting, because I heard a statistic recently about America, or the West or something, and they said that anti-Semitism, look out for that term, is up something like 500%. In other words, because the people start to figure out what all they're doing and how they're involved in so many evil things. But then it goes on to say he planned an address to the Rothschilds. Okay, page 15. I'll show it to you here on camera for all the people that say about the Rothschilds were behind it and whatever, yeah. Very plainly. So, there you go. The Rothschilds did have a hand, partly at least, in financing the nation of Israel. Page 16. The Jewish Company became the bank, then more specifically the Jewish Colonial Trust, and later the Anglo-Palestine Bank. If you don't understand the whole banking scam, modern banks being fractional reserve, there was the infamous interview between Steve Bannon, a Jesuit, and Jeffrey Epstein, a banker, big Wall Street banker. And Jeffrey Epstein was honest enough to say, yeah, it's the banking thing's a scam, essentially, because we use fractional reserve banking. You bring in $1, we'll lend it out 8 or 9 times when we don't even have that backing. So all the bankers are wealthy. No, they're not. They're scammers. And you bring your money, you put your money in deposit in the bank's lending it out to people in the area. That's why you should try to keep very little money in the bank, which I've talked about before. Find physical assets to put your money into and things to get it out of the banks. That's why I've promoted gold and silver. Physical gold and silver that you yourself own, in other words. There's other things as well, but don't want to get into a big thing on that right now. But page 18, the plan to create the Jewish state involved the Turkish debt, the German interest in the Orient. It involved stimulating the Russians and visiting the Pope, which if you know history, he did. Herzl visited with the Pope, trying to get him to be okay with this whole thing and help us with, this whole Jewish state thing and whatever else. Page 19. Then came the address to the Rothschilds. That was a memorandum which contained a proposal to Jewish philanthropists. And again, let me just explain something. If you don't understand the higher level financial world, what they do is when they get lots of money coming in, then they'll put it into philanthropy. They'll put it into non-taxable, 501c3 type of stuff, and tax-exempt organizations. So they'll hide their wealth in other places like that and say it's all about philanthropy. We're trying to help people. Yeah, trying to help yourself, so you don't have to pay taxes. Big part of how they do things, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh, it's philanthropy. They're helping to vaccinate people in third world countries. Inject them with poison. Page 28. We've traveled a long way since those times. Nowadays, the Jew is despised only for having a crooked nose or being a plutocrat, even when he happens to be a pauper. Again, his writing right there, page 28. And I'll show you here real quick before I continue. Let me find the next quote. Here's the ISBN on the back of it, in case you want to find this exact edition of the book. You can look up that information right there. Right there it is. There's different ones, different covers, whatever. Pretty common book, easy to get. Page 31. Now here's where it gets interesting. They're brought back in what? Unbelief, according to the scriptures, not according to my dispensational theology beliefs or whatever. The scriptures say that they're brought back in unbelief. You say, well, that happened in the first century. I'll get that from non-dispensationalists. Happened in the first century. All the prophecies of the Old Testament took place before Jesus Christ showed up. No, because they weren't scattered into all nations before Jesus Christ showed up. They are here Ezekiel chapter 36, they've been scattered in all nations, and God gathers them out of all nations, whither he has scattered them. All right, so no, Ezekiel 36 is a future event. It's starting to happen right now, but they still have to build Israel into a more financially stable environment, get rid of Iran with American lives and whatever else. All you Gen Zers, get ready to go and fight that war in Iran. Get ready to shed your blood. You have a war to fight for Israel's cause. Okay, don't forget that. But is it a religious thing? Oh, the Christians, we need to help our brothers and sisters in Israel. We need to go out there. We need to fight their wars for them because God is for them. God is for the nation of Israel. Really? Let's read. Page 31. It is no longer, and it has not been for a long time, a theological matter. It has nothing whatsoever to do with religion and conscience, declared Herzl. What is more, everyone knows it. The Jewish question is neither nationalistic nor religious. It is a social question. It's not religious. The nation of Israel is not a religious nation. Right there it is. You can read it for yourself. He admitted the substance of the anti-Semitic accusation, which linked the Jew with money. Herzl readily admitted it. And I've seen these Jewish rabbis, they'll do this all the time. Are you guys in doing the whole usury thing? Yeah, yeah, we do. You behind some of the guys that were behind the creation of the Federal Reserve in America? Yeah. You guys are the ones controlling the pornography thing completely? Yeah, we are. The brother that runs Stranger Than Fiction channel, he just brought out a video today showing Jews, and they're saying, yeah, we mostly controlled Hollywood, but we wanted to make sure that we controlled all of pornography. So yeah, we're the ones running pornography. All the different websites, yeah, Jews. And the adult films, most of the men in the adult films that we put out are Jewish men, and they're fornicating with Roman Catholic women. Again, proving the fifth kingdom. Mingled Jews and Roman Catholics working together. Committing spiritual as well as physical fornication for money. Continuing, page 31. But a man like Daniel would surely know that the historic homeland of the Jews no longer has any value for them. It is childish to go in search of the geographic location of this homeland. And if the Jews really returned home one day, they would discover on the next day that they do not belong together. Right there. I'm not making it up. The Jews get back to their land, they realize, hey, we don't belong together here. Pretty crazy. Page 36. Now the death of a useful man is criminally wasteful, for there are great tasks to be undertaken. About the money. We don't want to see guys die and things. We need to use them for their labor. You'll see it. In the early days of May, Herzl addressed to Baron de Hirsch, the sponsor of Jewish colonization in Argentina. Argentina? In these notes he writes, if the Jews are to be transformed into men of character at any reasonable period of time, say 10 or 20 years, or even 40, the interval needed by Moses, it cannot be done without migration. And what will be the message given to the men assembled? You are pariahs. You must forever tremble at the thought that you are about to be deprived of your rights and stripped of your possessions. You will be insulted when you walk in the street. If you are poor, you suffer doubly. If you are rich, you must conceal the fact. You are not admitted to any honorable calling, and if you deal in money, you are made the special focus of contempt. The situation will not change for the better, but rather for the worse. There is only way out into the Promised Land. Where the Promised Land was to be located, how it was to be acquired, is not yet mentioned. Herzl does not seem to have thought this question of decisive significance. It was a scientific matter. It was the organization of the migration which held his attention. The political preparations among the powers, the preliminary changes to be brought about among the masses by training, by tremendous propaganda to get people to believe that Israel is, the land, it's the chosen people and all this other stuff. The popularization of the idea through newspapers, books, pamphlets, lectures, pictures, songs. I didn't write it. Right there it is. Pause it and read it. Okay. Further down the page, page 37. And what is religion? Bethink yourself what the Jews have endured for 2,000 years for the sake of this fantasy. Fantasy. This book right here, just fantasy. Aesop's fables. Whatever other types of fantasies and whatever else out there. You know, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, whatever else in the Bible. And these are the blessed people of God, huh? The ones that you should send your money to. Help build their nation, their market. Over there. And I don't mean market as in a place where people go and they sell, you know, groceries or whatever. I'm saying understand marketing terms there. Page 39, the promised land where we can have hooked noses, black or red beards, and bow legs without being despised for it. Funny. Again, oh, there's racial allegations, racial slurs about Jews and whatever. They talk about it themselves. Page 40. Thus, in the course of 5 days, he addressed to his diary a 65-page pamphlet, in effect the outline of Der Judenstaat, which he called Address to the Rothschilds. Trying to market it to these wealthy people. Right there. This plan is a reserve against more evil days. Palestine alone came into the picture for a national concentration of the Jews. The address to the Rothschilds, which was the first complete writing of his plan. Its title was The Jewish State, an attempt of a modern solution to the Jewish problem. And that goes down here. But the general German press, especially the Jewish-controlled press, took a negative attitude. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and I've been talking about this for a while. Why are there Jews that are saying we don't want to go to Israel? Because of the marketing thing, if they want to stay in the country where they're at, making money. If they all have to return to one land, they're going to lose some of that market share in other places. And I get to these anti-Semitic people, I shouldn't even use the term anti-Semitic. I get to the people that are anti-Jew, that hate Jews completely, which I don't. And they come out and they say, oh, you know, these Jews have no right to the land of Israel. That's a secular state, the Rothschild creation, you know, and all this other stuff. And I like to say to them, okay, should they stay here then? If the Jews have no right to go back to the land of Israel, then do they stay here? You're so much against Zionism, where do the Jews go? Well, that's right, you're trying to say that they stay here. And the Jewish-controlled press was saying that exact thing. We shouldn't be forced to go back to the land of Israel. That might fulfill prophecy. That might get us over there where God's going to separate the wheat and the tares. God's wrath will be poured out on us. No thank you. Don't want to go back. Doesn't matter, you're going back. God's going to make it happen. Page 42. The first was the organization of the Society of Jews. The third, he had three different ideas here. The third was the creation of a press to influence public opinion and to prepare the Jewish masses for the Great Migration. The presses? The third was the creation of a press to influence public opinion. They wouldn't use the media to change people's minds, would they? Page 44. Incorporate the Jewish Colonial Trust. The financing behind the whole thing. Down a little bit further, it says, at this meeting, Father Ignatius, or Ignatius if you want to say it that way. Ignatius would be the way to say it in Spanish. This meeting, Father Ignatius, a Catholic believer in Zionism, referred to Herzl as, quote, a new Joshua who has come to fulfill the words of the prophet Ezekiel. Interesting. A Catholic believer in Zionism. A Roman Catholic priest, from what it sounds like. Page 45. When he was asked what the Kaiser should place before the Sultan as the gist of the Jewish proposals, Herzl What should we say what is the thing that you're trying to propose here to the Sultan who controls Palestine there where you want to go back? What's he say? Herzl replied, quote, a chartered company under German protection. That's what this land of Israel is going to be. It's a chartered company under German protection. Isn't that interesting? Page 46, talking about the land of Israel here, it says, the land lacked was water and shade. That we can supply, said Herzl. It would cost billions, but it will bring in billions too. Well, you certainly have enough money, more than all of us, said the Kaiser. So Kaiser, I'm not sure if it was Wilhelm first or second or whatever, but the Kaiser in Germany, he said, well, you have the money for this. It's going to cost you billions. You guys have the money. In the book, okay? Just reading what it says. Page 48. Baron Edmund de Rothschild became a member of the executive committee of the proposed Society of Jews. Right there, page 48 and 49. Page 50. There were the Russian Jewish students led by Leo Motzkin and a group called Young Israel headed by Heinrich Loewe. Loewe. I have to wonder if Lowe's store is owned by a descendant. Interesting. But continuing here, page 50, it says, every one of Herzl's ideas was met by protests and public excitement. The protests were usually launched by Jews. The calling of the Congress aroused a great deal of indignation in conservative circles. The rabbis of Germany protested not only to the holding of the Congress, but also the choice of Munich. So there are Jews that are against the creation of the state of Israel and whatever. Yeah, that's not just a new thing. That's what's going on in his day. Because they don't want to be forced back to the land of Israel for all this to happen. Page 51. On August 29th, 1897, the first Zionist Congress was assembled, not in Munich, but in Basel, Switzerland. Page 52. There was discussion of a bank, of a land redemption fund to be called the National Fund, the creation of a Hebrew university, and the clashes between practical and political Zionism. Interesting. Immediately, page 54, immediately after the first Congress, Herzl grappled with his second task, the creation of the Jewish Colonial Bank. He wrote of the bank in Die Welt in November 1898, the task of the Colonial Bank is to eliminate philanthropy. The settler on the land who increases its value by his labor merits more than a gift. He is entitled to credit. The prospective bank could therefore begin by extending the needed credits to the colonists. Later, it would expand into the instrument for the bringing in of Jews and would supply credits for transportation, agriculture, commerce, and construction. The whole debt system that they use, that they love to use. Page 56. And again, when I say they, please understand, I'm not saying every Jew is involved in finance, every Jew is involved in pornography, or whatever else, but there's sin there. And I'm going to rebuke that sin as a Christian preacher. I'm going to rebuke the sins of the nation of Israel. All right? I'm going to do that because I love them enough to tell them the truth, and I'd like to see some Jews get saved and flee from the wrath to come. All right, page 56. The Jewish Colonial Trust was finally established with headquarters in London. The Jewish National Fund and the Hebrew University was the hobby of Dr. Herman Shapiro. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. No relationship, I'm sure, to the Ben Shapiro, little weasel that he is. Page 57. The language in Congress used during Herzl's life was German, but gradually the imperfect use of German by East European Zionists led to the development of what was called Congress German. This was a form of German that was easy to use because respect for grammar and pronunciation was not required. Nice. So they can't speak Hebrew and they can't fully speak German either. Interesting because back in the Old Testament, when you have them mingling, I think if it was Ezra or Nehemiah, it was one of the two there. And when the Jews start to mingle with other people, their children can't speak in the language of the Jews. They can't speak in Hebrew. Something goes wrong with the mind of a Jew when they start to mingle with the people that they call dogs. Always confuses me. Oh, you're a Gentile dog. You're a goyim. then what are you doing trying to breed with us? Page 61. As a result of the English negotiations, Lord Rothschild seemed to be won over by Herzl. The old banker, who had refused 2 years before to meet the Zionist leader, now visited him in his hotel. There you have it, page 61. Where are we at here? Right there. Okay, pause it and read it. Page 62. Then Chamberlain made this remark, okay, from the British, whatever, the Parliament or whatever else there. Quote, "On my travels I saw a country for you, Uganda. On the coast it is hot, but in the interior the climate is excellent for Europeans." I want to give this to you, Herzl, and your Jews, because it's good for Europeans. Jews in name only, in other words. "You can plant cotton and sugar. I thought to myself that it is just the country for Dr. Herzl, but he must have Palestine and will move only into its vicinity." Goes on to say here, "That being the case," said Chamberlain, "what about Uganda? Self-administration would be accorded. The governor could definitely be a Jew." So they were considering other places other than Israel, the land of Palestine there to go back to, and whatever, the ancient biblical land of Israel. They considered Uganda. They considered Argentina as well. All right, now we have page 69 here. "The idea which I have developed in this pamphlet," this is Theodor Herzl now, this is actually getting to his writing. "The idea which I have developed in this pamphlet is a very old one. It is the restoration of the Jewish state. The world resounds with outcries against the Jews, and these outcries have awakened the slumbering idea." Page 70. "Those who are the first to inaugurate this movement will scarcely live to see its glorious close, but the inauguration of it is enough to give them a feeling of pride and the joy of spiritual freedom." Herzl died, I think it was 1904, and it wasn't, of course, till 1948, 44 years later, that Israel became a nation officially, was recognized as a nation. Page 72. "Perhaps our ambitious young men, to whom every road of progress is now closed, seeing in this Jewish state a bright prospect of freedom, happiness, and honors opening to them, will ensure the propagation of the idea. It depends on the Jews themselves whether this political pamphlet remains for the present a political romance. If the present generation is too dull to understand it rightly, a future finer and a better generation will arise to understand it," which is what happened. Took, like I said, 44 more years till it actually happened. Page 73. "Hence it is that even Jews faithfully repeat the cry of the anti-Semites. We depend for sustenance on the nations who are our hosts, and if we had no host to support us, we should die of starvation." All this talk about AIPAC and everything else, and we have to finance Israel and whatever, they're still doing it, even after they've had their nation since 1948. "We need not wake from long slumber like Rip Van Winkle to realize that the world is considerably altered by the production of new commodities. The technical progress made during this wonderful era enables even a man of most limited intelligence to note with his short-sighted eyes the appearance of new commodities all around him. The spirit of enterprise has created them." The Industrial Revolution. There's new commodities, new things that we can make money off of, in other words. They're everywhere. We can really get some good financing together to build our new nation. Continuing, it says, "All our material wealth has been brought about by men of enterprise. We do not depend on the circulation of old commodities because we produce new ones." New and improved. New, you have to have this. Don't dare miss it. Page 74. "The world possesses slaves of extraordinary capacity for work, whose appearance has been fatal to the production of handmade goods. These slaves are the machines." Again, Industrial Revolution. They're going to be the slaves of the Jewish people. Kind of interesting because now we're going to artificial intelligence. The fourth turning, the fifth the new industrial revolution, whatever they call it, World Economic Forum thing. Page 75. "The Jewish question exists wherever Jews live in perceptible numbers. Where it does not exist, it is carried by Jews in the course of their migrations. We naturally move to those places where we are not persecuted, and there our presence produces persecution. This is the case in every country, and will remain so, even in those highly civilized, for instance France, until the Jewish question finds a solution on a political basis. The unfortunate Jews are now carrying the seeds of anti-Semitism into England. They have already introduced into America. Wrote this in the late 1800s. Very interesting. Page 77. Assimilation, by which I understood not only external conformity in dress, habits, customs, and language, but also identity of feeling and manner. Assimilation of Jews could be effected only by intermarriage. But the need for mixed marriages would have to be felt by the majority. Their mere recognition by law would certainly not suffice. The Hungarian liberals, who have just given legal sanction to mixed marriages, have made a remarkable mistake which one of the earliest cases clearly illustrates. A baptized Jew married a Jewess. At the same time, the struggle to obtain the present form of marriage accentuated distinctions between Jews and Christians, thus hindering rather than aiding the fusion of races. The fusion of races. Those who really wished to see the Jews disappear through intermixture with other nations can only hope to see it come about in one way. The Jews must previously acquire economic power sufficiently great to overcome the old social prejudice against them. The aristocracy may serve as an example of this, for in its ranks occur the proportionally largest number of mixed marriages in the aristocracy. The Jewish families, which regild the old nobility with their money, become gradually absorbed. You look at the Prince William or whatever there in England, and Catherine Middleton or whatever else, she's actually a mingled Jew. So he's admitting to it. Late 1800s, he's saying, yeah, the Jews, we're going to have to get into the aristocracy, and we're going to have to try to intermarry and whatever else. Absolutely crazy. Page 78. My happier co-religionists will not believe me till Jew baiting teaches them the truth, for the longer anti-Semitism lies in abeyance, the more fiercely will it break out. In other words, the more it's suppressed, the worse it's going to get eventually, which we see here in the West right now. Page 80. Many Christian citizens, whom we call anti-Semites, can now offer determined resistance to the immigration of foreign Jews. So he admits Christian citizens whom we call anti-Semites. Right down there. You're a Christian? Well, you're automatically an anti-Semite. I get that all the time on these videos I've done about the Talmud. You know, it's just showing the quotes from the Talmud. I actually had a Jewish guy write in the comments one time, and he said, you know, the Talmud is rabbis arguing with each other. It's just debates back and forth. So if some Gentile comes along and is debating it as well, we should welcome that and not call him an anti-Semite. That's ridiculous. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that comment. But whatever. Page 81. And thus many an apparent friend of the Jews turns out, on careful inspection, to do nothing more than an anti-Semite of Jewish origin disguised as a philanthropist. In other words, they'll bring out their own stuff to make it look anti-Semitic. Yeah. Welcome to the wonderful world of military intelligence / propaganda. Hard to keep track of it sometimes, who's doing what. Page 83. The departure of the Jews will involve no economic disturbances, no crisis, no persecutions. In fact, the countries they abandon will revive to a new period of prosperity. Well, if they would actually do that, then yeah, it would. But they don't really want to do that. Page 86. We have attained preeminence in finance because medieval conditions drove us to it. The same process is now being repeated. We are again being forced into finance. Now it is the stock exchange by being kept out of other branches of economic activity. Being on the stock exchange, we are consequently exposed afresh to contempt. It's other people's fault that we're, messing around with people and destroying them financially and hyperinflating currencies and, gambling all the time with the stock markets and fractional reserve banking. And it's other people's fault. They drove us to it. Oh, okay. Educated Jews without means are now rapidly becoming socialists. Yeah. Then he goes on to say about their prosperity creates anti-Semitism. Page 88. But we know that all this can be done by machinery. The agrarian question is only a question of machinery. Again, he's writing this in the late 1800s. Remember that. So the whole mechanized everything hasn't really even been seen that much yet. Page 90. How is our movable property to be got hold of now? It consists of printed papers which are locked up somewhere or other in the world, perhaps in the coffers of Christians. Where the progressive income taxes enforce, all our movable property can eventually be laid hold of. Well, that was kind of an interesting thing. In other words, one of the things that they do, their financial world there, is they keep things moving. They have to have it liquidity they call it. And I don't want to own my home. I'm going to just make payments on my home so I can invest my other money other places and things like that. I don't want to pay off my loans and my debts. I'm just going to keep accruing more debt so I can have more. My finances are always liquid. What happens if financial stuff goes wrong? Well, they could take it all from me. That's what happens when you're gambling with debt all the time, doing a Robert Kiyosaki type of a deal. Don't actually own anything. You're just constantly keeping it all in the thing, and just so you can make more money. Why? So I can make more money. To make more money, so I can make more money. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver. Start to get a little nuts in the head after a while when you are not satisfied. Page 91. When we rise, there rises also our terrible power of the purse. So when the Jews get into a country and they start to rise up in power, they'll do all kinds of financial scheming stuff, is what he's admitting to. Okay, continuing, it says, it is true that we do not love our enemies. They don't love their enemies. You know, I see these professing Christians that go to Israel and they're just, oh, I love the Jewish people. They're going, and the Jews are going, yeah, oh, we love you too. Yeah. Then what are you doing behind the pornography thing? What are you doing behind the toxic food additives? What are you doing behind the Hollywood thing and the Federal Reserve bankrupting people, destroying people's finances? What are you doing if you really love us as Christians and we're brothers and the Judeo-Christian world? And give me a break. Continuing, it says here, we might perhaps be able to merge ourselves entirely into surrounding races if these were to leave us in peace for a period of 2 generations. So again, there's some of these people that they want to get rid of the fact that they are Jews. They want to just say, oh, well, we're religious Jews. And we want to intermarry with people to try to destroy our race. His writing. Page 92. The world is provoked somehow by our prosperity. It is in its ignorance and narrowness of heart, it fails to observe that prosperity weakens our Judaism and extinguishes our peculiarities. Which I would agree with that. Prosperity for anybody can mess you up. Read 1 Timothy chapter 6 if you want more information on that. Page 93. We must not imagine the departure of the Jew to be a sudden one. It will be gradual, continuous, and will cover many decades. The poorest will go first to cultivate the soil. Their labor will create trade, trade will create markets, and markets will attract new settlers. We could blow up Gaza, and eventually, we'll clear away the rubble, and then we're going to go in there and put in new real estate, and it'll attract more Jews to the land. Exactly what they're planning, as they've done through other parts of the nation of Israel. Again, understand, it's not the Jews that are doing this. It's the synagogue of Satan, primarily. Okay? So you can't just condemn everybody that's a Jew. It's this corporation called Israel. Israel Incorporated, financed by the American taxpayer to make people richer. That's what it's all about. That's what the Bible said would happen. They get brought back in unbelief. Page 94. If we wish to conduct building operations, we shall not plant a mass of stakes and piles on the shore of a lake, but we shall build as men build now. Indeed, we shall build in a bolder and more stately style than was ever adopted before, for we now possess means which men never yet possessed. Interesting. Page 95. Shall we choose Palestine or Argentine? We shall take what is given us and what is selected by Jewish public opinion. The society will determine both these points. So they would have taken Argentina. But he says here, page 96, Palestine is our ever memorable historic home. We should, as a neutral state, remain in contact with all Europe, which would have to guarantee our existence. So we're going to rely on the West to continue to finance us and will be our ally until such time as we don't need them anymore. Then we can just dump them. Continuing on page 96 here. A scheme such as mine is gravely imperiled if it is opposed by practical people. Now, practical, he has in quotations, people are, as a rule, nothing more than men sunk into the groove of daily routine, unable to emerge from a narrow circle of antiquated ideas. Now, he wouldn't mean that, of course, would he? At the same time, their adverse opinion carries great weight and can do considerable harm to a new project, at any rate, until this new thing is sufficiently strong to throw the practical people and their moldy notions to the winds. That's what he thinks of common people like you and me. You know, those of us that actually work, get our hands dirty, that aren't getting rich by gambling in the stock market. Practical people. With their moldy notions and their antiquated ideas. Page 98. The Jewish company is partly modeled on the lines of a great land acquisition company. Not spiritual. Land acquisition company. Page 99. At this juncture, the company will enter upon another branch of its functions. It will take over the management of abandoned estates till such time as it can dispose of them to the greatest advantage. Like Gaza. The company will endeavor everywhere to facilitate the acquisition of land by its tenants who are Christians. Huh? You mean to tell me that the nation of Israel is going to try to use Christians to invest in things? Get their money. Page 100. The land which the Society of Jews will have secured by international law must, of course, be privately acquired. It will negotiate principally for the acquisition of fiscal domains with the great object of taking possession of this land over there without paying a price too high, in the same way as it sells here without accepting one too low. The company will sell building sites at reasonable rates to its officials and will allow them to mortgage these for the building of their homes. All the immense profits of the speculation in land will go to the company. Immense profits. Ching, ching, ching. There will be places of amusement. This is page 102. There will be places of amusement for the proper conduct of which the Society of Jews will be responsible. So they have sports and things like that. Amusement parks. Continuing here on page 102. American farmers work on the system of mutual assistance in the construction of homes. This childishly amicable system, which is as clumsy as the block houses erected, can be developed on much finer lines. A little attitude there, In other words, neighbors helping each other build a home is childishly amicable and clumsy. Nice, real nice. Page 103. Our unskilled laborers, who will come at first from the great reservoirs of Russia and Romania, they will be obliged to build with wood in the beginning. Later on, the original inadequate makeshift buildings will be replaced by superior dwellings. So I guess my house here that's made out of wood, some wood paneling here. Older place, also out of style, I know. Just terrible to have wood paneling on your interior. It should be drywall and all the other stuff. My old wood house here, I guess it's an inadequate building. Should be torn down and a nice skyscraper put here. Of course, I don't have the financing of the Jews behind me, so that won't work. Page 104. My house was built in the 1960s here, so just so out of date. Talk about daily tasks and things, should only be performed during 7 hours. Indeed not. There will be 14 hours of labor, work being done in shifts of 3.5 hours. The organization of all this will be military in character. They're going to have military regimentation when it comes to working in their nation as they're building into new markets. Page 106. The principle is to furnish every needy man with easy, unskilled work. Unskilled work, such as chopping wood. There's no skill that goes into that, in other words. Or cutting faggots used for lighting stoves in Paris households. Faggots is just an old term for like pieces of firewood. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with a sodomite. This is a kind of prison work before the crime, done without loss of character. It talks about which allows rich men to throw tidbits to their dogs. So if you're out chopping wood, that's unskilled labor, and rich men can come along and they can buy it. It's kind of like throwing a tidbit to their dog. Better show that one. What do you think of that? Nice. The institution certainly loses 10 centimes, but the Jewish company will not lose 1,000 millions. It will draw enormous profits from this expenditure. The defect of these small organizations so far has been that they have been prohibited from entering into competition with timber merchants, etc. Timber merchants are electors. They would protest and would be justified in protesting. Competition with state prison labor has also been forbidden, for the state must occupy and feed its criminals. But there is room in a new society. For above all, we require enormous numbers of unskilled laborers to do the first rough work of settlement, to lay down roads, plant trees, level the ground, construct railroads, telegraph installations, etc. All this will be carried out in accordance with a large and previously settled plan. Commerce. The labor carried to the new country will naturally create trade. The first markets will supply only the absolute necessities of life: cattle, grain, working clothes, tools, arms, to mention just a few things. These we shall be obliged at first to procure from neighboring states or from Europe. Give us money so we can build Israel over there, in other words. But we shall make ourselves independent as soon as possible. The Jewish entrepreneurs will soon realize the business prospects that the new country offers. It's a market. It's what it is. Brought back in unbelief. It's not God's holy nation over there. It's not. God said it would come back, but it comes back in unbelief. Yes, it fulfills prophecy, but it's not a nation that you should be praying for the blessing of it. You should be praying that some of the Jews would come out of it before the wrath hits them. Continuing here, page 108. 100 different types of houses will be erected and, of course, repeated. These beautiful types will form part of our propaganda. See some of the beautiful architecture and everything over there in Israel? It's propaganda. They use it for propaganda to get more investors. Page 109. Rich Jews who are now obliged carefully to secrete their valuables and to hold their dreary banquets behind lowered curtains will be able to enjoy their possessions in peace over there. If in the new settlement rich Jews begin to rebuild their mansions, which are stared at in Europe with such envious eyes, it will soon become fashionable to live over there in beautiful modern houses. Page 110. Jews are known to adapt themselves with remarkable ease to any form of earning a livelihood, and they will quickly learn to carry on a new industry. Interesting. Then it goes on to say here, page 110, here comes an opportunity for that inner migration of Christian citizens into positions evacuated by Jews. In other words, when Jews leave a country, the Christians can come into what they were doing. The departing Jew will not lose his personal business credit, but will carry it with him and make good use of it in a new country to establish himself. The Jewish company will open a current bank account for him, and he can sell the goodwill of his original business. That makes me wonder if the Goodwill used clothing store thing is maybe tied into the Jews somehow. No idea. If you know anything about that, leave it in the comments section below. Page 111. If a Jew cannot sell his business or entrust it to a proxy or wish to give up its personal management, he may stay where he is. The Jews who stay will be none the worse off, for they will be relieved of the competition of those who leave, and will no longer hear the anti-Semitic cry, "Don't buy from Jews." He goes on to say he sells his original business or hands it over to his Christian representative to manage, and goes off to take charge of the new one. Judeo-Christian, Jews and Christians working together in business. Interesting. A fourth method might be the continued working of the business under the original proprietors, who would return at intervals to inspect their property as foreigners, and as such under the protection of law in every civilized state. In other words, they would have dual citizenship. Are we seeing that today here in America? Yes, we are. Pretty incredible. It goes on to say here, I have already mentioned that honest anti-Semites, whilst preserving their independence, will combine with our officials in controlling the transfer of our estates. Though little appreciated as citizens, are highly valued in finance. Talking about the Jews. Leaving in the country businesses which we have built up by means of Jewish acumen and Jewish industry, by letting our Christian fellow citizens move into our evacuated possessions. Moreover, inherited and acquired rights were destroyed, and only cunning buyers enriched themselves by the purchase of state properties. It's all about finance. You haven't figured that out yet. Page 115. Any loss the company sustains by this transaction will be booked as a business loss. Those who are absolutely without means will pay off their debt to the company by working overtime at a fair rate of wage. It goes on to say here, for the Promised land is the land of work. The promised land will not yet have been conquered. So they're talking about conquering things. Down further here, page 116. For example, in the organizing of the clothing industry, the quantity produced will at first be kept down so as to preserve an equilibrium between supply and demand. And whenever the company undertakes the organization of new industries, the same precaution must be exercised. Again, understand another concept within the financial scheming system out there. You have the issue of supply and demand. So sometimes there are farms and they will destroy crops to lower the supply, to keep the demand high. That way they can continue to keep the prices up. Because if you have too much supply, you have to the prices will start to come down. It's all part of the scheming thing. It's unjust weights and balances, which are an abomination to the Lord. In the Old Testament it says that. Page 117. Here's a good one. I'll show you this one. How about it talks about the society will be able to prevent the introduction of non-Jewish work slaves. Here's what they think of you. Are you a non-Jewish work slave? Isn't that nice? Page 118. The amount actually necessary will be fixed by financiers and will in any case be a very considerable sum. Page 119. The three methods of raising capital are through big banks, through small and private banks, through public subscription. Page 121. The notion of raising money in this way is not by any means impracticable. The experiment of collecting Christian money to form an opposing force to the big banks has already been tried. That one could also oppose them with Jewish money has not been thought of until now. Oh, we're going to please donate to Israel, to the promised land, sending the Jews back to they're using quote unquote Christian money to get the Jews back over there and to build things and whatever else. Propagandizing people, making them think that it's somehow this blessed nation of God, when it's actually cursed right now. Page 123. We Jews are even now constantly shifting from place to place, a strong current actually carrying us westward over the sea to the United States, where our presence is also not desired. So he's saying this back in the 1800s. Late 1800s he's writing that, saying people in America don't like us. 125, page 125. Every group will have its rabbi traveling with his congregation. Our rabbis, on whom we especially call, will devote their energies to the service of our idea, and will inspire their congregations by preaching it from the pulpit. Page 126. The rabbis will receive communications regularly from both society and company, and will announce and explain these to their congregations. Interesting. Page 129. The phenomena of multitudes. Great exertions will hardly be necessary to spur on the movement. Anti-Semites provide the requisite impetus. They need only to do what they did before, and then they will create a desire to emigrate where it did not previously exist and strengthen it where it existed before. Wait, hold on a second. Are you saying by this quote that anti-Semitism can be used by the Jews to get people, more Jews, to come back to Israel? That's what he says here, page 129, that they're going to use anti-Semitism as a way to get people to return, Jews to return to the land. Makes you kind of wonder about some of the people out there that are called anti-Semites. And they're saying some interesting things. But page 130. But when our desperados increase the value of the land by their presence and by the labor they expend on it, they make it at the same time increasingly attractive as a place of settlement to people who are better off. Higher and yet higher strata will feel tempted to go over. He talks about Zionist societies there. It's interesting. There are certain Jewish benefactors on a large scale who try to alleviate the sufferings of the Jews by Zionist experiments. Thus the philanthropists said, we pay these people to go there. People are being paid to go back to Israel. It's crazy. But check this out, how they use propaganda, especially in sports. Look at this. This is amazing right here. This is page 130. A fanciful illustration will make my meaning more explicit. One of those philanthropists, whom we will call the Baron, and myself both wish to get a crowd of people onto the plain of Longchamps near Paris on a hot Sunday afternoon. The Baron, by promising them 10 francs each, will, for 200,000 francs, bring out 20,000 perspiring and miserable people who will curse him for having given them so much annoyance. Whereas I will offer these 200,000 francs as a prize for the swiftest racehorse. And then I shall have to put up barriers to keep the people off Longchamps. They will pay to go in, 1 franc, 5 francs, 20 francs. The consequence will be that I shall get the 500,000 of people out there. The President of the Republic will drive up à la demande, and the crowds, I probably said that wrong, and the crowds will enjoy and amuse themselves. Most of them will think it is an agreeable walk in the open air in spite of heat and dust, and I shall have made by my 200,000 francs about 1 million in entrance money and taxes on gaming. It's incredible, the scheming that these people do. And the people to whom we had promised nothing, because we cannot promise anything without deceiving them. Look at that one, page 131. We promised them something, but we can't actually come through with it because we have to deceive them. Down there. God's blessing on the Jewish people. Okay, you want to be blessed as a Jew? Put your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. There's your blessing. I'm not interested in Jesus. Then there's no blessing, only a curse for you. You have to fake, the Bible says that Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there ye may be also. The Jews say, that's okay, no, we don't want your mansion. We'll build one here. Walk the streets of gold up there. No, thank you. We'll try to build it here. Wicked. Page 132. They will hurry off at dawn so as to be first on the spot. They will form unions, cartels. Talk about what they're going to do as propaganda to get people in and whatever. How many times have you seen people, there's some new product coming out and they're camping at the store and all this stuff? It's in the Jewish state. Continuing here on the same page, page 132. I call on the richest Jews as witnesses of my veracity. Why do they carry on so many different industries? Why do they send men to work underground and to raise coal amid terrible dangers for meager pay? They're behind it. And he goes on to say here, I shall merely refer quite briefly to the Mohammedan pilgrimages to Mecca, the Catholic pilgrimages to Lourdes, and to many other spots whence men return comforted by their faith, and to the Holy Hock at Trier. Thus we shall also create a center for the deep religious needs of our people. Our ministers will understand it us first and will be with us in this. So, find that interesting. Page 134. Jews are of a thrifty and adaptable disposition and are qualified for any means of earning a living, and it will therefore suffice to make small trading unremunerative. To cause even present peddlers to give it up altogether. This could be brought about by, for example, by encouraging large department stores which provide all necessaries of life, Again, this is written in the late 1800s. Where were the department stores back then? Then you get Sears and Roebuck, and you get a lot of these other ones coming in. In that time, I guess they would have been back in then. But interesting. These general stores are already crushing small trading in large cities. In a land of new civilization, they will absolutely prevent its existence. The establishment of these stores is further advantageous because it makes the country immediately habitable for people who require more refined necessaries of life. All your shopping in one place. You don't have to go all around town and go to this, hardworking guy and this blacksmith over here and this hat maker over there and this woman that makes dresses, and then down to the butcher and over to the mechanic and then over to the dentist. No, we'll just have it all in one store. Well, thankfully that one didn't happen. I mean, it was written in the late 1800s, but we don't see anything like that out there. Right. Page 137. The theories of a divine institution or of superior power or of a contract and the patriarchal and patrimonial theories do not accord with modern views. Secular. This is secular. It's not a divine institution, the nation of Israel. His own words. The theory of rationality leaves this question conveniently and carefully unanswered. We're not going to answer those questions. Yeah. Page 138. The Romans, with their marvelous sense of justice, produced that noble masterpiece, the Negatorium Justio. And I'm not going to read this whole thing here. Seeing here. Yeah, but it says about the gesture of the Jews must therefore be a body corporate, and that is the society of Jews. All right. And it gets into the whole thing of legal, things between state and, banking and all the other stuff there. Like I said, I'm not going to go through that whole thing. You can get the book and read it for yourself. I'm trying to get through this thing as quick as I can. Page 140 talks about when he imparted his scheme in London at the top here. And it goes on to say, the society will have scientific and political tasks for the founding of a Jewish state, as I conceive it, presupposes the application of scientific methods. We cannot journey out of Egypt today in the primitive fashion of ancient times. Primitive fashion of ancient times. What's that? The book of Exodus. The Torah. We're not going to compare it to that. Thus the society will find out for the first time whether the Jews really wish to go to the Promised Land and whether they must go there. Page 141. Our first object is, as I said before, supremacy, assured to us by international law over a portion of the globe sufficiently large to satisfy our just requirements. They want supremacy. Page 142. Thus we must investigate and take possession of the new Jewish country by means of every modern expedient. Page 144 talks about parliaments and produces that objectionable class of men, professional politicians. Now, I would agree with them on that one. Politicians, professional politicians are a objectionable class of men. But he talks about our customs become daily more complex with the growth of commerce and increase of culture. Page 145. We are a modern nation and wish to be the most modern in the world. They're testing technologies over there. If you know about the 5G thing, that was a weapon tested by the Israelis. But there's also some new ones that they're testing, which I found out about. I'm going to be bringing out some really hardcore stuff on that. Really scary stuff. But down here, page 145, under language, it says, we cannot converse with one another in Hebrew. Like it says in Ezra and Nehemiah. When you mingle, they lose that Hebrew language. Who amongst us has a sufficient acquaintance with Hebrew to ask for a railway ticket in that language? Such a thing cannot be done. Right there it is. You can pause it and read it. Well, we'll tell you about the Hebrew, what the Hebrew says here, and how your King James Bible's in error. You won't tell me anything about it. Page 146. Now here we go. Okay? Theodor Herzl. He's a European. He's not a Jew. He's a Jew in name only. He's a quote-unquote religious Jew. And for most of his life, he didn't even identify as a Jew until he wanted to go back to the Jewish state. And then all of a sudden, I'm a Jew. I need to fight for my people and everything else. But listen to what he says. His words. Our community of race is peculiar and unique, for we are bound together only by the faith of our fathers. But here's where it gets really good. You see, the Bible prophesies that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is going to be ruling and reigning on the earth for 1,000 years in the future. All right? The premillennial coming of Jesus Christ. Done multiple studies. I'm not going to get into all the scriptures to support that right now. They're available online for free. Take the time to study those. That's what the Bible says would happen. Okay? That God is going to rule on this earth. The law of the Lord will come out of Jerusalem. Okay? He will teach us of his ways from the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is the city of the great king. All right? Look at this. Theocracy. Shall we end by having a theocracy? Theos, God, ruling. No, indeed. Faith unites us. Knowledge gives us freedom. We shall therefore prevent any theocratic tendencies from coming to the fore on the part of our priesthood. We're not going to have God ruling over us. Right there. Every man will be as free and undisturbed in his faith or his disbelief as he is in his nationality. And if it should occur that men of other creeds and different nationalities come to live amongst us, we should accord them honorable protection and equality before the law. Here on the next page, page 147, he talks about old religious intolerance. The flag. I would suggest a white flag with 7 golden stars. The white field symbolizes our pure new life. The white there, what is the 7 golden stars? You say, 7 spirits of God, maybe? The 7 angels? Well, he wouldn't do that because that's New Testament. What about the 7 gold candlesticks? You know, there'd be some kind of religious thing connection to the Old Testament. What's the 7 stars stand for? The stars, are the 7 golden hours of our working day. That's what he wanted. Right there it is. And you can look it up. I'm not going to show the image here because I'm not sure which is the right one, but just do a little Google image search, original flag for the nation of Israel, and you'll see his sketches and whatever else for what he wanted for the flag. To represent work. Yeah. Page 151. The word impossible has ceased to exist in the vocabulary of technical science. Were a man who lived in the last century to return to the earth, he would find the life of today full of incomprehensible magic. Interesting. To build a city takes in our time as many years as it formerly required centuries. America offers endless examples of this. Just as we shall introduce the 7-hour day as an experiment for the good of humanity. You go back to the 1800s, late 1800s, most people were working 5-hour days. Then they went to 7-hour days. Now, 8-hour day won't even do it anymore. Won't even pay the bills. You have to work overtime and whatever else. Just crazy. But 2 more quotes to read here, I think, and then we're done. Yeah. Page 155. Our rich, who have a pleasurable acquaintance with all our technical achievements, know full well how much money can do, and thus it will be, just the poor and simple, who do not know what power man already exercises over the forces of nature. Prayers will be offered up for the success of our work in temples and in churches also. Show you this quote yet? Right down there. Christian, what you have to understand is, if you are saved, if you are born again, the nation of Israel that's currently over there is the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. It is. It came back in unbelief. There are many people who call themselves religious Jews that have no relation to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at all. Some are mingled, okay? And so there's still some issues there. They're mingled with Gentiles. How can you call yourself a member of the tribe of Israel? That's kind of weird. But these people are identified as the synagogue of Satan, and God's wrath is coming upon that nation. If you truly love the Jewish people, you say that I want to believe that I love the Jewish people and I pray for the peace of Jerusalem and things as the Bible says I'm supposed to do, okay? Pray for their salvation. Pray that they get saved. They put their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Jesus is not an option of, well, you don't really have to believe in him. They do. They have their own kind of path and their own kind of special thing with God. No, there are no other options. Jesus Christ. The Apostle Peter, speaking to the Jews of his day, there in the first century, and he says, neither is there salvation in any other, for there's none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. Acts chapter 4 talks about that. Jesus is it. That's salvation. They reject Jesus Christ, spend eternity in hell, just like any other Gentile or any Gentile out there. All right? If you truly love the Jews, you will witness to the Jews. You won't say, God bless the nation of Israel, because that nation right now is an accursed nation. Just like the Bible said would happen. If you're expecting, there will be a saved nation eventually over there that will come back and then that's going to fulfill prophecy. No, you're looking for the wrong thing. You don't understand the scriptures. All right, so be real careful about blessing what God says his wrath is coming upon. You need to be real careful about that. I hope that you've learned something from this study. If any of you out there have other insights or other things you'd like to put in the comments, please put them in the comments section below. But as Christians, we also need to work at getting them out of this country. They don't belong in America. Israel is the land of promise. Israel is where things will happen. Okay? So that is going to be it. And as always, thank you very much for watching.